My best friend got my wife pregnant. My parents found out 5 months before I did. My sister knew for 6 weeks. And every single one of them sat across from me at Sunday dinners, asked how work was going, passed the rolls and smiled. I was the last person in my own life to know. My name is Reid. I'm 31 years old. I work as a structural engineer for a mid-size firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. Bridges, parking structures, commercial foundations. The kind of work where a miscalculation doesn't just cost money, it costs lives. I am careful by profession and by nature. I check things twice. I build systems. I don't assume. That's what makes this so hard to explain. I missed all of it. My wife's name was Sloan. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party when we were both 24. She was a speech therapist at a pediatric clinic, patient and warm in a way that felt rare. She laughed at things other people let go. She remembered the names of my coworkers, my supervisor's kids, the barista at the coffee place we went to on Saturday mornings. I thought that meant she was present. I've since learned it means she was good at performing presence. My best friend was a guy named Colt. We'd known each other since freshman year at NC State. He was the kind of friend who showed up to moving days, to hospital waiting rooms, to your front porch at midnight when you called him, and couldn't say exactly why. He was the best man at my wedding. He gave a speech that made my mother cry. He said I was the most loyal person he'd ever known. I've thought about that word a lot since then. Loyal. Colt worked in sales for a software company. He traveled a fair amount. Atlanta, Raleigh, Richmond. But when he was in Charlotte, he was around constantly. He'd come by the house for dinner. He'd text Sloan about restaurant recommendations, ask her opinion on gifts for his girlfriend, that kind of thing. I never thought twice about it. You don't when you trust someone completely. I was gone 4 days out of every 2 weeks on average. Site visits, client meetings, field inspections. The job required it. Sloan knew that going in. We talked about it before we got engaged. That there would be stretches where I'd be away, that we'd need to communicate, that distance was something we'd manage together. I thought we were managing it. We had been married 3 years when I came home from a site visit in Greenville 2 days ahead of schedule. The client had pushed back the inspection, and instead of sitting in a hotel room waiting, I just drove home. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I didn't call ahead. I thought she'd be at work. Her car was in the driveway. Colt's truck was behind it. I sat in my car in front of my own house for a moment. The same thing every brain does. It starts building the innocent explanation first. She must have taken a sick day. He must have stopped by. Maybe something happened and he came over to check on her. Maybe there's a completely normal reason for this. I went inside. The downstairs was empty. I could hear music upstairs. Something low and soft from our bedroom. I stood in the hallway at the bottom of the stairs for what felt like a long time, but was probably 15 seconds. Then I turned around, walked back out the front door, got in my car, and drove to a gas station 3 blocks away. I sat in the parking lot for 2 hours. At 4:47 p.m., Colt's truck drove past. I watched it go by in my rearview mirror and felt something in my chest go very quiet. Not loud, not explosive. Just quiet. Like a room after the power cuts out. I drove back home. Sloan was in the kitchen when I walked in. She startled when she saw me, grabbed the counter for half a second, then composed herself so fast that someone who didn't know her wouldn't have caught it. I knew her. "You're home early," she said. "Client postponed," I said. She crossed the kitchen and hugged me. She smelled like her shampoo and something else I couldn't name. I hugged her back. I asked if she was feeling okay, said I'd noticed her car was home. She said she'd had a headache, left work at noon, felt fine now. I said I was glad. Then I asked if anyone had stopped by. She said no. Just a quiet afternoon. I nodded, said tired from the drive. I went upstairs and stood in our bedroom and looked at the bed, and then at the bathroom, and then at the window, and then at nothing for a while. Then I washed my face, went back downstairs, and we ate dinner together. And talked about whether to repaint the back deck before summer. That was the first night I understood how much cold a person can carry, showing it. I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark next to Sloan and thought through every angle. I thought about what I'd seen. Which was nothing, technically. Trucks in driveways. A wife who startled. A lie I couldn't prove yet. I thought about what I might be wrong about. I ran through the math 3 times the way I do with load calculations, trying to find the error before committing to a conclusion. By morning I had decided one thing. I was not going to react until I knew everything. Not until I had the complete structure. Not just the surface. So I built the case. Bank records first. Sloan and I had a joint account for household expenses and separate accounts for personal spending. I went through the joint account and found charges that didn't match anything I've recognized. A restaurant in the South End neighborhood on a Tuesday evening, when I was in Greenville. A hotel spa charge on a weekday afternoon. A boutique I'd never heard of. Not outrageous amounts. Small enough to seem like ordinary life. Big enough together to form a pattern. Her phone was next. I don't love admitting this part. People have opinions about looking through a spouse's phone. Those people haven't found what I found. Her passcode was the year we started dating. She hadn't changed it in 4 years. I took that as the kind of detail that either means she's not hiding anything or means she forgot that trust runs in both directions. The messages went back 7 months. 7 months of careful navigation around my work schedule. Texts that said things like, "He's in Greenville through Thursday," and "Don't come by on weekends. His sister might stop over." Voice notes I couldn't bring myself to listen to more than once. A conversation where Sloan sent Colt a photo, and he replied with something that made clear they'd done this many times before and both knew exactly what it was. Then I found the conversation from 3 weeks prior. She'd sent him a photo of a pregnancy test. 2 lines. He responded with, "Oh God. Are you sure?" She said she'd taken 3. He asked whose it was. She said she wasn't positive but that timing-wise it was most likely his. That sentence didn't break me. I want to be clear about that. There wasn't a dramatic collapse. What happened was more like watching a building you designed fail. A slow, awful recognition that something you built your life around had a flaw you missed. And that flaw had been there long before you saw it. I saved every screenshot. I forwarded copies to a private email account, photographed the bank statements, created a document with dates and details, organized the way I'd organize a project timeline. I do this at work for every major job. I'd never imagined doing it for my marriage. For 3 weeks I kept going. I came home, I had dinner, I asked about her day. I watched TV beside her, I slept in the same bed. Once she mentioned that Colt had texted asking if we wanted to grab dinner sometime. I said sure, sounds good, we'll figure out a night. She looked at me with something unreadable in her eyes. I smiled and picked up the remote. The moment I lost everyone wasn't when I found the messages. It was at my parents' house in Concord on a Saturday afternoon. At one of those low-key family gatherings that happen whenever my mother decides the weather is nice enough to justify firing up the grill. My sister and her husband came. My aunt, my uncle's family from Kannapolis, and Colt came. He came to my parents' house. He came and they let him. I watched him arrive and hug my mother. I watched my father shake his hand. I watched my sister say something to him near the cooler. That made him glance in my direction once, and then look away too quickly. That was the first needle. I'd gotten good at watching by then. I noticed things I would have missed 2 months earlier. The way Colt and Sloan didn't stand near each other. The way my mother's expression shifted when she looked at me. Not warm, not casual. Careful. The way my father kept looking at his phone. I decided to test it. I was standing near the grill with my father when I said, "Firm might be sending me to Portland for 6 months. Big infrastructure project, bridge overhaul downtown. They're asking for senior staff." My father set down his beer. My mother turned around from the table faster than the conversation required. My sister looked at her shoes. 6 months? My mother said. "Reid, that's a long time." "It would be good for my career," I said. My father put a hand on my shoulder. "Hey, can we step inside for a minute?" There it was. We went into the kitchen. My mother followed. My sister appeared at the door. They closed it behind me like I was 14. And had done something they needed to handle carefully. My mother spoke first. She said they'd wanted to talk to me for a while. She said something had happened that they'd been trying to figure out how to approach. She said Sloan had come to them. Which meant Sloan had gone to my parents about this, before telling me. Let that sit for a second. My wife had told my family she was pregnant before she told me. She had gone to my mother's house, sat at the kitchen table where I'd grown up eating breakfast, and explained the situation. My mother had listened. My father had listened. My sister had found out 6 weeks later and also listened, and then they had all, together, decided that the way forward was to not tell me. They were going to manage it. That word, manage, my mother used it. She said they were trying to manage this carefully. She said Sloan was scared. She said Colt had made a terrible mistake. She said that the baby was still going to be family no matter what. She said she hoped I would think about that. I asked when Sloan had told her. My mother's eyes went to the window. 4 months ago, my father said. Quietly, 4 months. My father said he and my mother had talked to Colt. He said they believed it was over. He said these things were complicated and he hoped I could hear them out before reacting. My uncle came in to get a bag of ice, and walked back out very quickly when he read the room. Which meant my uncle also knew. I looked at my father and said, "How many people at this barbecue know?" Nobody answered fast enough. That was the answer. I said I needed some air. I walked out the back door and sat on the steps of my parents' deck. The same deck I'd helped my father build. When I was 16. The summer he taught me how to set posts and seal joints. So water wouldn't get in and rot the wood underneath. I remember him saying that the work you do under the surface matters more than what anyone sees. Colt came outside. I heard the door open behind me. He sat down a few feet away. He said my name. I stood up, said I was going to head out. He said he knew I was upset. I said I wasn't upset. I said I was just going to head out. He said I should talk to Sloan, that she was scared, that this wasn't how either of them wanted this to happen. I got in my car. In the rear view, I saw him standing in the driveway watching me go. They probably thought I needed a few days to cool off. They didn't know that by the time I pulled out of my parents' driveway, I had already been gone for 3 weeks in every way that mattered. I drove straight to my college roommate Jasper's house. He'd gone to law school, moved to a firm in Charlotte that handled family law, real estate, and civil litigation. More importantly, he was not part of my family, not a mutual friend, not someone with a stake in keeping the peace. He opened his door and took one look at my face and said, "Come in." We sat at his kitchen table for 2 hours. I laid out everything, the screenshots, the timeline, the bank statements, the barbecue, the 4 months my parents had known. He read it without saying anything. When he finished, he leaned back and exhaled. "What do you want to do?" I told him I didn't want a confrontation. I didn't want to sit across from Sloan in a mediator's office and talk about our feelings. I didn't want to give anyone a chance to manage me. I said, "I want to be gone before anyone realizes I'm leaving." He became my lawyer right there. He pulled up property records. The house was in both our names. We'd bought it together 2 years into the marriage. That complicated things, but not impossibly. He said with the right documentation of financial contributions, and considering North Carolina's equitable distribution laws, I was in a reasonable position. The joint savings account had $87,000 in it. I had put in approximately $70,000 of that over 3 years. He said to move carefully and document the basis. I asked about the pregnancy, about any potential claim on me for a child that wasn't mine. He said if I wasn't the biological father, and we established paternity elsewhere, I had no legal obligation. But we'd need the DNA result to be definitive before the divorce was final. He looked at me. "Once you start this, it moves fast." I said it already had. Monday I called my firm's HR department and asked about a transfers. There was a position in Denver, a long-term project, commercial district reconstruction, 12-month commitment. I said I was interested. My direct supervisor was surprised. I'd never asked to transfer before. He said he'd make the calls. By Wednesday it was approved. Monday night I had texted Sloan. "Firm wants me in Raleigh most of this week. Sorry for the short notice. I'll explain when I'm back." She replied with a heart. I spent Tuesday and Wednesday at Jasper's. We filed the divorce petition Wednesday afternoon. I'd requested that service be handled by a process server at Sloan's workplace. Thursday morning, I opened a new checking account at a credit union in Rock Hill, just across the South Carolina line. I transferred $70,000 from the joint account, documented every dollar with Jasper's guidance. I removed Sloan as a beneficiary on my life insurance policy, removed her from my health insurance as of the end of the month, removed her car from my auto policy. The car was registered in my name. I'd been making the payments. Friday, I listed the house. I had a real estate attorney Jasper recommended. A quiet listing, no yard sign. I told them I wanted a fast close. By Saturday evening there was an offer. $418,000 cash 35-day close. I accepted. Sloan didn't know our house was already gone. The process server reached her at the pediatric clinic, where she worked on a Thursday morning, between appointments. According to Jasper, she called him before she called me. My phone rang 17 times in the first 2 hours. Sloan, then my mother, then my father, then Colt, then my sister, then my aunt. I watched the screen and let it ring. By evening I had more missed calls than I'd received in the past 2 months combined. From people who had managed to stay very quiet for 4 months, when silence cost them nothing. I did not listen to a single voicemail. The following week I drove to Denver. I didn't fly. I wanted the drive. 3 days through Tennessee, Missouri, Kansas. The flat middle of the country opening up around me, until Charlotte was just a direction and not a place. I ate at diners. I slept in a motel outside Kansas City. I called nobody. Denver was cold in a clean way, nothing like the wet cold of North Carolina winters. I checked into an extended stay hotel in the Highlands neighborhood, and started work the following Monday. The project was a full structural overhaul of a commercial block downtown. 4 buildings, a parking structure, 2 years of assessments before ground was broken. Complex, demanding, exactly what I needed. People in new cities don't ask about your life because they don't know you have one. I was just the engineer from Charlotte. That was enough. 2 months after I left, the DNA test came back. Court ordered, as part of the divorce proceedings. Colt was the father. Not probably. Definitively. Jasper called me during my lunch break. "You're clear," he said. "No paternity claim, no child support, no legal tie to the child Sloan was carrying." I sat in my car in a parking garage in downtown Denver and felt something release in my chest, like a cable under tension finally going slack. Not happiness. Relief. The kind that comes when you've been bracing for a load and it finally doesn't land. The divorce finalized 4 months later. The house had already closed. After fees, I cleared $388,000. Sloan received her personal property, some furniture we'd bought together that Jasper negotiated as hers given what she was walking into, and whatever she could claim from 2 years of joint expenses. Which wasn't much. She didn't get the savings. She didn't get the house. She didn't get a version of the life she had been quietly dismantling from the inside. I heard about the fallout in fragments. Jasper gave me the legal updates. A former coworker texted once to ask if I was okay, and mentioned that things in Charlotte felt strange. That Colt had lost several of his clients after word got around. That my sister was having a hard time. That my parents were not doing well. I didn't respond to the coworker's text. The old phone sat in my hotel nightstand for months. I turned it on once about 12 weeks after I left. There were messages from everyone. Sloane's went from angry to pleading. To something that sounded close to honest. She said she didn't expect me to forgive her, but she wanted me to know. She understood now what she'd done to me, not just what she'd lost. My mother's were long, careful. Full of phrases like "we were trying to protect you, and we didn't want you to be blindsided." I turned it back off. Being blindsided is precisely what happened, and the reason it happened was the people who were trying to protect me. Colt sent 43 messages in the first month. They started casual, almost offended. Like I'd overreacted to something minor. Then they got smaller. By week 6 he wrote, "I don't know how to be sorry in a way that reaches you. I know you don't care, but I think about it every day." I turned the phone off before I finished reading it. I bought a truck in Denver, and started exploring on weekends. Colorado has a particular kind of landscape that does something useful to your sense of scale. You drive an hour out of the city, and you're in mountains that were old when the continent was being sorted out. Your problems don't disappear, but they shrink to an appropriate size. I needed that. About 8 months in, I met someone at a work event, a project planner named Addie, who'd moved to Denver from Minneapolis the year before. She was straightforward in a way that felt like oxygen after months of holding my breath. She said exactly what she thought. She didn't perform closeness she didn't feel. When I told her I was recently divorced, she said, "That's rough. You doing okay?" Not a follow-up examination. Just a real question asked in a real way. We started getting coffee after site meetings. Eventually dinner. She didn't push into the things I kept closed. She respected walls without needing me to explain why they were there. Addie didn't fix me. I want to be clear about that. Because I've heard the version of this story where the new person is the cure, and I don't believe in that version. She just existed the way good people do. Reliably, honestly, without agenda. That turned out to be exactly what I needed to remember the shape of. A year after I left Charlotte, I got a letter from my mother. She'd found my Denver address through the county property records. I'd registered a car there. The letter was 3 pages, handwritten, and it said everything she hadn't said at the barbecue. She said she was sorry. She said they made the wrong call. She said she'd tried to tell herself they were protecting me, but looking back she knew they were protecting their own picture of what our family was supposed to look like. She said she missed me every day. She said my father had started going to a therapist. Which was a sentence I never expected to read. I read the letter twice at my kitchen table. Then I put it in a drawer and sat with it for a month. I wrote back once. 3 sentences. "I am alive and I am well. I need more time than this. Please don't try to contact me through property records again." I mailed it before I could rethink it. My sister reached me through Jasper. She asked him to pass along a message that she was sorry. And that she understood if I never wanted to talk to her. But that she'd made a choice she regretted and wanted me to know that. Jasper forwarded the message without editorializing. I appreciated that about him. I sat with my sister's message for a long time. We'd been close growing up. She was 3 years older and had always been someone I trusted without thinking about it. The same way you trust the floor. Finding out she'd known for 6 weeks and said nothing to me was a specific kind of grief, different from what I felt about Sloane or Colt. With them the betrayal had a logic, even an ugly one. With my sister it just felt like loss. I didn't respond. Not because I'd decided never to. Because I wasn't ready. Those are different things and I was getting better at knowing the difference. 18 months after Denver, the firm offered me a senior position in Seattle. Longer term, more responsibility, a project scale I'd been working toward for 6 years. A real bridge, not a metaphor, an actual bridge. A pedestrian crossing over a lake inlet in the south part of the city. My name would be on the structural engineering record. I took it. Seattle was rain and mountains and a particular brand of people who respect other people's quiet. I rented a house in Columbia City, a neighborhood with old craftsman homes and coffee shops, and a farmer's market on Sundays. I put down roots in a way I hadn't let myself do in Denver, bought furniture I intended to keep, planted things in the yard, introduced myself to my neighbors by name. Addie visited for a long weekend in November. She was applying for positions on the West Coast herself. 8 months later she moved to Portland, an hour and a half away. We made it work in the way people do when both of them actually want to. 2 years after I left Charlotte, I turned on the old phone one last time. The new messages had stopped coming in about 6 months earlier. Sloane's last message was from the previous spring. She said, the baby had been born healthy, a girl. She said she wasn't reaching out to make me feel anything. She just thought I should know. She said she was sorry in a way that didn't ask anything from me. I looked at the message for a few minutes. Then I turned the phone off and put it in a box in the garage. That child had nothing to do with me. She was innocent in the way that all children are innocent. Completely, without option. I didn't wish her harm. I didn't carry anger toward her. But innocence doesn't create obligation any more than geography creates family. She had a father. A complicated, deeply flawed father who would spend the rest of his life living with what he'd done. But a father. She had a mother. She didn't need me to absorb her parents' guilt by proxy. That's the part people struggle with. They want the story to end with some kind of reclamation. The uncle who forgives and shows up at birthday parties. The couple who reconciles. The family that finds its way back. They want narrative resolution because the alternative, real absence, is harder to sit with. But I'd learned something about absence. It isn't the same as destruction. I didn't destroy anyone. I removed myself. I stopped absorbing what wasn't mine to carry. I stopped standing in a circle of people who had voted without me on what my life should look like, and agreed that their comfort was worth more than my knowing. I called my mother for the first time in 2 years on a Tuesday night in March, from my kitchen in Columbia City. I called without announcing it. She picked up on the second ring. There was pause, and then she said my name in a way that made clear. She'd been waiting for that sound for a long time. We talked for 40 minutes. We didn't resolve anything. I didn't forgive her in the clean, declarative way she probably needed to hear. But we talked. She told me my father was doing better. She told me my sister had had a baby, a boy, 8 months earlier. She told me she'd learned, finally, that the people you love most are not yours to manage. I said I appreciated her saying that. I told her I needed to go slow. She said she understood. I didn't call my father yet. I didn't call my sister. I didn't have any plans to ever speak to Colt again. Not out of active hatred, but out of the simple recognition that some things, once broken, don't have a repaired version that functions the way the original did. The engineering principle is called fatigue failure. Stress applied repeatedly over time degrades a material's structural integrity, until even loads it once handled easily become too much. You don't repair fatigued steel, you replace it. Sloane I wished no particular harm. She was living her life somewhere in Charlotte, raising a daughter, working presumably, figuring out what she was. I didn't think about her often. When I did, it wasn't with anger. It was with the faint, removed sadness you feel for a version of yourself that no longer exists. 3 years out from that Tuesday afternoon in my own driveway, I was 34. I had a house I'd chosen alone in a city that didn't know my history. I had a job that put my name on things that would outlast me. I had a person who chose me without needing me to perform anything. I had quiet mornings and a yard I maintained, and the kind of sleep that comes when nothing in your life is a lie. People say distance is a wound. I think they're wrong. Distance is what happens after the wound. The clean air getting in. The slow work that doesn't look like anything from the outside, but is everything on the inside. My family wanted closure. They wanted me to return to the circle, and let the story have a softer ending. What they got instead was an empty seat, a name that turned into a pause in conversations, a presence that became most noticeable through its absence. I didn't give them nothing. I gave them the truth of what they'd done by making it permanent. That is not cruelty, that is consequence. And consequence, when you've been paying it alone for long enough, eventually becomes something that looks a lot like peace.